Alright, so welcome to lesson 12 of our Primavera P6 training. So today we're going to be looking at updating project status. If you've paid attention to when we started, we said that there are 5 process groups in project management. We have the initiating, then we have the planning, we have the executing, we have the monitoring and controlling, and then we have the closing. So during the initiating, this is basically where we start the project, like we explained. So that's where a charter or project charter is issued. And then during the planning, what we've been doing since we started this particular course is under planning. So this is basically where you create your work breakdown structure, like we have done, then your activities, then the dependencies, the duration, the cost, the resources, and then remember, once you finish with your planning, you baseline. So baseline was the last thing that we did. That's the previous lesson. That is chapter 11 of our Primavera P6 training. So please, if you've not done that, you might want to go and take a look at the previous lessons to be able to understand what we are talking about. So typically what happens is the moment you finish planning and then you baseline. So baseline is, a point in time where you have like a picture. You're basically taking a picture of your plan. It simply means that you're ready for execution or you're ready for implementation. So next would now be executing. So what happens during the executing is that in the course of the project, as a scheduler, you will now begin to get reports using some tools, maybe timesheets and all of that. You now begin to get reports on actual accomplishments. So they'll begin to send you actuals. For example, how long an activity took, then when the activity started, the finish date of the activity, how much was spent or how much each resource earned, and all of that. So that's what you do during the actuals part of your, that's what you do during the executing part of your processes. So in order to enable us do that seamlessly, that's exactly what updating project status is all about. So we're going to be looking at executing, that is updating our project status with actual, and then subsequently we shall now take a look at monitoring and controlling. This way we're now going to be checking project as it is being performed and make sure that as much as possible that such project is in line with the objective that has been set up from day one. So in order for us to report or update our project status, we're going to be working primarily on the status tab in the detail view, as well as the resource tab in the detail view. So these are the two primary portions within our Primavera P6 module where we're going to be working in order to enable us to update progress as work is being implemented. Okay, so let's dive in. Okay, so this is where we left it the last time after we have baseline. Remember, our baseline is the yellow bar that is showing below. So it's now time for us to report actuals. So for us to report actuals, remember, like I mentioned, we're going to be working primarily from the status tab in the detail view. So this is the status tab, and note that for you to be able to do this, you need to make sure that this tab is being displayed. Just in case your status tab is not displayed, simply right click on any of these tabs here, then click on customize activity details. So you're going to see the available tabs here. Let me just do this. So you see the relevant available tabs. So all you simply need to do is click on the double arrow and add all your tabs, then click on OK. So you will see the status tab, and within the status tab, this is now where we're going to start updating the activities. So the first activity, of course, is initiate building. And remember, we said initiate building is a milestone, and that's why you're seeing the symbol here looking like a stone. So the exciting thing with initiate building is, with the milestone, is the fact that once you check started, automatically Primavera will check finished for you and tell you that this particular activity has been completed 100%. So if I check started right now, watch what happens. You can see finish gets checked, and then also notice that it tells me that the activity has been completed 100%. The reason is simple. Remember, initiate building is a milestone, and we said that milestones have 0 duration, and that's the reason why you're seeing the current situation. Alright, so we'll go to the next activity. But before we do that, it is only necessary that we display what we refer to as the progress spotlight. So the progress spotlight is a tool that helps us to determine the set of activities that we're going to be updating at any point in time. That's what the progress spotlight does. So let me expand my timeline view. So it's a bit more conspicuous. So if I go to the tools bar and then I click on the progress spotlight, you notice that something that looks like a yellow bar vertical appears within your Gantt. Again, if your Gantt is not displaying, simply double click on your Gantt and then it will display, just in case your Gantt is not displaying as we're speaking. Alright, so once you turn on the progress spotlight, you're going to see the progress bar displayed. Also understand that the activities that this particular progress spotlight highlights are now the activities you're going to be seeing in yellow within your table. So look at it from this perspective. As a scheduler, you do updating. You update your schedule, let's say every week, once every week. Okay, so if that's the case, what you're basically going to do is you turn on your progress spotlight. So you click by turning it on, and then you move your progress spotlight to the exact dates that you're going to be updating. So let's say we're updating as at Friday the 14th of February. So this is when we're doing our update. So remember, the moment I just moved my progress spotlight to Friday the 14th of February, notice that the activities that should have been done or should have started by that Friday the 14th of February gets highlighted. So in my own case, I should have started my initiate building and then the design building layout. So why is this necessary? If you have over 1,000 activities, it may be very difficult for you to say, okay, I need to update this activity today, and then I now search for another one that needs to be updated and all of that. So that's why once you turn on the progress spotlight, it will highlight all the activities that ought to have started as at that date, and then based on that, you now do your update. So remember, as at Friday the 14th of February, we are supposed to have started the initiate building, and then remember we check started, and we're assuming that it started at exactly the same planned start date, which is on the 6th of February. And then the design building layout, we are assuming that the design building layout started 2 days later than planned. So you simply click on started, and then you click on the calendar under the started part, and then you select the fact that it started 2 days later than planned. So in this case, our 2 days later than planned would be Saturday 8th of February. Now watch what happens to the Gantt. You can see that the bar at the top has shifted, and then also notice that the baseline bar, which is the bar below, remains and did not shift. So that's part of the reason why I told you that your baselines are absolutely necessary. Now another thing we can also be on the lookout for is to check the status of our baselines in our table. Remember, in the previous exercise we had baseline start, then also baseline finish. Let me quickly display those columns again so that you can see what I am talking about. So I go and then I type in BL project starts. You may already have this. I had to remove it when I had too many columns in my Primavera P6. Okay, so this should be project. Okay, so I have BL project start, and my BL project start, I put it before my start. Then I also put BL project finish. So for my BL project finish, I also add it and then put it before finish. Okay, so I click on apply and then I click on OK. Alright, so notice what has happened here. If you notice, we said that this very activity, which is design building layout, started on the 8th of February. So you can see under the start column is now showing 8th of February. But then under the baseline start, remember we said it was supposed to start on the 6th. So you can see the baseline start is still showing us 6th of February. So once you've been able to do that, then you can as well enter the percentage complete, and that's exactly what you have in the next box. However, before we continue, if you notice here, you have what we refer to as duration percent. It is nice for us to be able to distinguish between what we refer to as duration percent as well as physical percent. So when we talk about duration percent, what we're basically saying in duration percent is that we have what we refer to as uniform production rate. Uniform production rate. Now, what does that mean? We're simply saying that if we're using a uniform production rate, we're building a house, and we've determined that this house will take 10 days. Therefore, if we say we are 50% duration complete, Primavera would say that we have spent 5 days in the performance of this task, and will now tell us that our remaining number of days is 5 days. So you can see that's what we call uniform production rate. In other words, in uniform production rate, it is expected that you do equal amount of work on a daily basis, and as the day goes by, you accomplish the relevant percentage of work that should be done on that particular day. Say for example, activity A is a 2 days duration activity. So if you have done day 1, Primavera will just assume that we have done 50% of activity A. So that's exactly the whole idea of duration percent complete. So you can see we said under the duration percent complete, we assume that we have what we call a uniform production rate. Now, beyond that, there's also what we now refer to as the physical percentage complete. In physical percentage complete, this now means that we do not have a uniform production rate. So it simply means that our production rate is not uniform. And that's what happens with the physical percentage complete. So if we go back again to our house exercise, don't forget that sometimes it may not necessarily mean that because we have done 1 day of an activity, for example, that takes 2 days, it therefore means that half or 50% of the activity has been done. There could be what we now refer to as a learning curve. In other words, that the team would learn as the job is being done. So if that's the case, at the start of that particular activity, you may have a slow pace. So they may spend more number of days doing the work on the start of that activity, maybe the first few days. For example, maybe day 1 and then day 2. Then by day 3, they would have been able to build their capacity and they will begin to move at a faster rate. So you notice that on day 3, they might accomplish all that was done within day 1 and day 2. And then by day 4, they have already built the capacity to do as much as they did in day 1, 2, and 3 just in 1 day. And then of course the efficiency also increases in day 5 as the work progresses. So if that's the case, the production rate is not uniform. And if the production rate is not uniform, this is where you now use your physical percentage complete. So you're using your physical percentage complete. Once you've entered the percentage complete of a particular activity that's under physical percentage complete, you would notice that the remaining duration in Primavera P6 will not change. So you need to also go and manually enter what the remaining duration is, and then of course you now need to recalculate your values in order for you to be able to get the right computation with Primavera P6. So we're going to be illustrating all of that using our Primavera P6. So I want us to display 2 columns now, and the 2 columns I want us to display are, we're going to be displaying the activity status column, as well as percent complete type column. So these are the 2 very important columns that I want us to add in our Primavera P6 to be able to do this very illustration. So we're going to be adding the 2 columns right away. So again, I right click, then I click on my columns, and then I go to find a type in activity status. So I add my activity status. I want the activity status to be just before my original duration, and then I also look for percent complete type. Percent complete type, just percent complete type, nothing else. Okay, so I added percent complete type. Okay, good. So let it be after my activity status, and then I click on okay. All right, good. So notice that I have added these two columns now. I have my activity status column, and then I also have my percent complete type column. So you can see from my activity status column, I can see activities that are not started, the one that is in progress, just like I've updated, which is the design building layer. Remember, we have updated that this activity has started, so it's showing in progress, and then the one that is complete, and that's exactly what the milestone is showing, because we have completed that. So again, notice that we have percent complete type. In my own case, my percent complete type default is the duration percent complete type, and sometimes we can actually change this percent complete type. So if you want to change the percent complete type, so let's assume that plumbing design will run on physical percent complete. So under the percent complete type, within the cell under the percent complete type for plumbing, simply double click on it, it will drop down, then select physical. So this is the physical percent complete. Then also let's do same for design building approval, and then conduct bidder conference, and then also for inspect procured items. Okay, good. So these are the ones we're going to be using for the physical percent complete, as the case may be. Let's also use M&E design. Let's also make it physical percent complete. Alright, so you notice that once I change the percent complete type for an activity in the detail view, it changes. Okay, good. So remember, we have updated the activity A1010, which is the design building layout, and we have said that it started on the 8th of February. And let's assume that as at the date we are updating, which is on Friday the 14th of February, that this activity has been done up to 40%. Don't forget, if you take a look at my duration in the detail view, you're going to see that the original duration for this activity is 10 days, and then you can see that the remaining duration is still showing 10 days. So let's assume, okay, let me use 50% instead. So let's assume that this activity has been done halfway. In other words, we've done 50%. So I'm going to be entering 50% under the duration percent complete. Then watch what happens to the remaining duration the moment I do that. So I type in 50% and then I click enter. So the moment I do that, notice that my remaining duration shows that I have 5 days remaining. So remember earlier on I told you that if you're using the duration percent complete, that what the duration percent complete assumes that we are running what we call a uniform production rate. And then of course, uniform production rate simply means that if we do a certain percent of an activity, Primavera will assume that the equal amount of percentage has also been spent under the duration. So once we've been able to enter that, so this takes care of the duration, then the next thing we're going to now do is to update the actual cost. So to update the actual cost, we do that under the resources tab. So you can see in my own case, for this particular activity, that is the design building layout, it was assigned to Emmanuel, and then the budgeted cost is 5,000. So you can see that here Primavera is already telling me that my actual cost is 2,500, considering the fact that I have done this activity halfway. Sometimes it may be true that if your progress rate is uniform, your production rate is uniform, but then other times you may also have a situation where your actual cost actually is not dependent on the duration or the number of days that has been spent on that activity. So if that's the case, let's say we have a cost overrun. So here, instead of 2,500, we have spent 3,000. So I enter 3,000 in my actual cost. So it changes to 3,000 for the 50% duration complete. Okay, good. So I have updated this very activity as at 14th of February. And then once I've done that, notice that as at 14th of February, that's the only activity that is slated to have started. So there is no other activity. Then I now go and schedule this is the schedule button, or you can click F9 on your keyboard. So when I click on schedule, the schedule window pops up. Now under my current data date simply means exactly the date you're doing this update. So remember, in our own case, we're making the update as at 14th of February. So I click on the browse button and then I select 14th February, click on the select button, then I now click on schedule. So the moment I do that, notice what happens to my Gantt. So you see the blue bar here. So the blue bar here is showing you that half of this work has been done. And then you also notice that the progress spotlight has moved from where it was initially, which was on Tuesday, and has started on Friday as it is. And it simply means that it's now asking me, okay, when is the next time I'm going to be making an update? So again, let's assume I am now going to be making a next update the following week Friday. So the following week Friday is Friday the 21st of February. So again, I move my I click on my progress spotlight and then I drag it to 21st of February, Friday 21st of February. So in this case, notice that the activities that are now highlighted are the design building layout, of course, which is still in progress, and then the design building, which should have started on the 21st of February. So it's now time for me to report on those activities that should have started on that particular date, on those particular dates. Okay, good. So as usual, I need to report on design building layout as at that 21st of February. So again, I click on design building layout and then I go to my status tab. This activity is expected to be completed on the 20th. I'm doing my reporting on the 21st. And then we're told that this activity, however, was completed on the 21st. So I check finished and then I click on my browse button and then I select 21st. So you can see the whole bar changes to blue, and then my duration percent complete changes to 100, showing that this activity has been completed. Then also remaining duration changes to 0. Again, if I now go to my resources part, I now choose the cost part. It tells me that my actual cost is 5,000. Well, let's assume that in all we spent 6,000 on this activity, so I simply enter 6,000 here. Then from my progress spotlight, another activity that should be updated as at today, that's 21st of February, is design building. Design building is also a duration percent complete activity. So I go to status and then I check started. This activity was supposed to start on the from what has been happening so far, because it's dependent on the initial activity. So Primavera has moved it to 21st, but let's assume that this activity actually started before 21st. So let's assume it started on the 19th of February. So I select 19th. Don't forget, you must check started first, and then I click on select. So you can see the bar moves, a bit ahead to of the baseline. And then under the percent complete, let's say as at 21st, 10% has been done. So again, once I enter that, watch what happens to the remaining duration. And then I click on enter. You can see that remaining duration changes to 9 days. And then I go to my resources part and I enter the actual cost. So you can see 10% has been complete. So it tells me that 500 has been spent. So let's assume that there is no variance here, that we'll spend 500 as at the 10% complete. So again, once you're done with that, you click on schedule and then you change your current data date to 21st, which is the date you're doing this update, and then you click on schedule. So again, once you do that, notice that the progress spotlight begins again from that 21st. And then we're going to be doing a next update. Some of you may have what to refer to as the progress line currently displayed. This is the progress line, so let me click on it. So you can see my progress line now. That's this red line that you're seeing here. I'm sure some of you, vertical line you're seeing here, I'm sure some of you may already have it displayed. So you can see what the progress line is basically explaining to us is, it helps us to know from just looking at it on a high level in the Gantt to know when activities are ahead of schedule or behind schedule, as the case may be. So again, if we now analyze our schedule, if you take a look at the baseline start for these activities that we have updated, you can see that the baseline start is now gradually differing from the start, and then also that the baseline finish is also beginning to differ or change from the finish that earlier on we planned. And that's part of the reason why we actually baseline, in order to help us to make some of these interpretations. So again, we are going to be updating next week Friday, so we move our progress spotlight to Friday the 28th of February. So as at Friday the 28th of February, activities that should be updated as at Friday the 28th of February are our design building layout. This is already completed, so there might not be any need for us to update this activity. And then design building, that's the activity that is currently in progress, so this activity needs to be updated right now. That's about the only one that needs to be updated. So again, I go to my status, and then as at this Friday 28th, as at Friday 28th for design building, 70% of the activity has been done. So I simply remember there is no need for me to check started again, because this activity is already in progress. So I enter 70% of the activity that has been done. I hit enter, and then it calculates the remaining finish date for me. And then notice that my progress spotlight, notice that my progress line is now moving forward. That's this red vertical line. You can see it's now looking a bit zigzag. So forward pushing simply means that this activity is ahead of schedule. However, if it pushes backward, it means that the activity is behind schedule. So again, I go to my resources, and then I assume that the resource is also progressing at the agreed rate. So I'm going to be leaving it at the rate. So remember I said no variance with regards to the cost. So again, I click on my schedule button, I change my schedule date to 28, which is the date I'm doing this update, and then I click on schedule. So the moment I do that, you notice that the progress spotlight also shifts, and then we're going to be starting again as it is. We are now going to be updating again as at next week Friday the 6th of March. So again, I move my progress spotlight to the 6th of March, which is where we are. So as at 6th of March, activities that should be updated are the design building, the M&E design, and then the plumbing design. So first I start with my design building. So under my design building, this should be updated. So this activity, I go to my status tab. So this activity is supposed to have finished on the 3rd of March, and we're on the 6th of March. So I check finished, but let's assume that this activity, instead of finishing on the 3rd of March, finished a day ahead of schedule. So it finished on the 2nd of March. So I select 2nd of March. So you can see it shows now that this activity finished earlier than planned. And then you can see that my it's showing that this activity finished earlier than planned, and then you can see that my remaining duration is now showing me 0, and it's also reporting that I finished this activity. My actual for this activity is 8 days. I finished it in 8 days as against 10 days. So again, I go to my resource. I'm going to be leaving the cost for this activity because I'm assuming that there is no variance with regards to cost for this activity. Now the next activity that needs to be updated is now the M&E design. So to update it, I click on it, and then I go to my status tab. I check started. So notice that this is a physical % complete activity. It means that it does not have uniform production rate. So since that is the case, I click on physical % complete, and then I checked started. So I'm assuming that this activity started on the agreed date, which is on the 4th of March, which is what we have here. And so I'm assuming that this activity started on the planned start date, which is on the 5th of March. If you take a look at your baseline start, this activity is supposed to start on the 5th of March. So I'm going to change the start date to 5th of March. That is the expected start date for that activity. And then that so far only on the as at this 5th of March, and then so far about 50% of the activity has been done. Okay, that's exactly what I am reporting. So the moment I enter 50%, notice that my remaining duration doesn't change. It still remains 8 days. So I need to manually now change this remaining duration. Remember, like I explained earlier on, if you're using the physical percent complete type, once you've entered the physical percent complete, the remaining duration still remains the same. So I go here and then I enter 7 days. That we have 7 days left for this very activity. Then I go to my resources part, and if you notice, I'm going to be reporting my actual here. So let's assume so far we have spent 3,000. Okay, so I enter 3,000 there, and then for my plumbing design, which is also a physical percent complete activity, I go back to status, I check started, and let's assume this activity started on the 6th of March. So I select 6th of March, so you can see it displayed here, and then I enter that only about 10% of this activity has been done. And again, I go to my now there's also another very interesting function here, which is the expected finish. So I can also update my remaining duration from the expected finish date. In other words, once I enter my expected finish date, it will help me compute the remaining duration. That's for physical percent complete. So notice that from the foregoing, this activity should have finished on the 12th of March based on what has been happening so far. If we check the baseline finish for this activity is actually 11th of March. In other words, what we planned was that this activity should finish on the 11th of March. However, let's assume that with the way things are going, that this activity has been forecast to finish on the 16th of March. So under the expected finish, I select 16th of March, which is what I've done here. So when I select 15th of March, you can see my expected finish changes to 15th of March. Then when I now schedule, you will now watch what would happen to the remaining duration. So I click on my schedule button. Remember, this update, we're making it as at 6th of March. So I go and then I select 6th of March, and then I click on schedule. So the moment I click on schedule, notice that my remaining duration for this activity changes to 7 days, because we said that we're going to be expected finish is 16th of March. Then the finish date shifts to 16th of March based on the report that we have given so far. And then my progress line is now backwards, showing me that with regards to this activity that I am behind schedule. Okay, good. So again, we're going to be updating for the following week. So we move our progress slide to Friday the 13th of March. So this is exactly what I am doing now. So as at Friday the 13th of March, again, you can see these two activities that are highlighted in yellow are the only activities that should have been started as at that Friday the 13th of March. Okay, so again, for my M&E design, this activity is already in progress. So I go and enter the fact that this activity, let's assume that 90% has been done as at this date. So again, I enter 90%, and I can enter my expected finish date, or I now manually enter my remaining date. So let's assume 1 day is remaining for this activity, and then I navigate back to my resources and update my actual. So let's assume we have already spent 5,000 so far. Now we select the next one, which is plumbing design. Then we go to status, plumbing design. we said that 10% has already been done. So let's assume as at this date that 50% has been completed. And then again, I go to my remaining duration, and then I add that I have about 4 days left for this very activity, and then I hit on enter. All right, so those are the 2 activities that needs updating. So again, I go to my schedule, I change my current data date to 13th, and then I click on schedule. So the report also gets illustrated with my Primavera. Okay, so let's do this final one. I'm sure you already understand how this update is going. So I now also move my progress spotlight to next week Friday, which is the 20th of March. Okay, so once I do that, notice that it spotlights my M&E design, plumbing design, and then also it's showing me that my design approval should also have started. So all of these are all physical percent complete. So again, for my M&E design, let's assume this activity has been finished, but then it now finished on the 17th of March. So I select 17th of March, and then under the resource part, I go and enter the actual cost. So let's assume that this activity in all we spent 7,000 as against the budgeted cost of 4,000. Then plumbing design, I check the status, and let's say plumbing design also has been completed, so I check finish, and then let's assume it finished on the 16th, which was the expected finish date. And I now go to my resources part. I click on resources, and then let's assume that we did this particular activity way below budget, so we spent 1,500 as against 2,500. Then the next activity that should be updated from my schedule is my design approval. So this design approval should have started based on where we are. So let me check started. So let's assume that this design approval started on the planned start date, which is on the 17th, and then as at today we have done about 40% of work. So I type in 40%, and then I change my expected finish date to, let's say I'm expecting this activity will finish earlier than planned, to 24th. So once I'm done with that, I can simply go to my schedule, then change my date again to 20th, which is the current data date, and then I click on schedule. Okay, good. So once I do that, Primavera will update the schedule and let me know the status of my activities. So let me turn off the progress lights, and then also the progress spotlight, and then also the progress line, as it were. Okay, good. So now from this we have been able to do our update. The key thing that we try to illustrate here is the fact that when executing starts and you begin to get report about work as it is being done, this is exactly how you're going to be updating it. Say for example once a week. So all you simply need to do is turn on your progress spotlight, and then move your progress spotlight to the relevant week where the update needs to be done, and then do the update on your status tab. Simply check started. If the activity has started, enter the date the activity was started. If the activity is physical percent complete, enter the percentage of work that's been done. Then you go and change the remaining duration. If it is duration complete, you simply enter the percentage of work that has been done. You don't need to touch the remaining duration. Then you go to your resources tab, and then you now enter the actual cost for each of your resources, because sometimes you may have more than one resource category, how much has been spent so far, and that's now what represents your actual. Okay, so based on this, Primavera will do the analysis for you, show you how your project is progressing, and then also it illustrates that in your Gantt chart as well. However, one key thing that we are now going to do is now to analyze the results that we have gotten. So in analysis of the result that we have gotten, what we're now going to be doing with regards to that analysis is the end value management. So end value management is now one key tool that will help us to be able to analyze these results, to be able to determine if our project is on schedule, behind schedule, on budget or is over budget. All of that is what we're going to be discussing in the very next lesson. Once again, thank you for listening. I hope this particular lesson has been very informative for you. I will see you in the next lesson.